So today I'm here with Aaron Jordan of the Roast House. So happy to have him on. They're a coffee roastery in town who's doing amazing things. They have a great following and just a great brand voice. And so it's something that if you haven't heard of them, you're going to get to know about them. And then if even if you do know Aaron, you're going to get to learn more about him today. So Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you.
Yes, me too. And so I guess I want to just get going and we were chatting before this, but how did you land at the roast house? So how does this all begin?
Okay. Is this like, are we a PG or R rated? Where's the level of
Um,
explicit nature of this podcast?
I might have to hire
Or
an editor
can,
to bleep, so maybe
okay,
let's keep it
okay.
mellow.
We'll keep it clean. Well, if you follow Roast House a little bit, we are a tad bit crass, but it's always out of joy. We have a rule around here that we don't curse out of anger. uh, or at least try to reduce that. Um, but yeah, so I got started back in Detroit, Michigan area,
Yeah.
probably about, let's see, that would be 16 years ago.
Wow.
And corporate coffee joint, drive through, blender drinks, the whole nine, high volume, frozen egg sandwiches, that kind of stuff. And ran that for a couple years. Right out of high school, I worked my way up into a general manager position for the franchise, and then so kind of fell in love with coffee. I was always in the restaurant industry, so I loved crafting beverages and food. Fell right into coffee, and then moved to Chicago, did my undergrad there, and I got into roasting at home just to save some cash during college. You're a broke college student, you're trying
Yeah.
to save some
Oh
money. And so I thought,
yeah.
well, green coffee costs, $4 a pound to buy some really good stuff. And, buying it at the store is going to cost me $10 to $15. So, immediate ROI right there. And a roaster at the time, I was using a stovetop whirly pop, the old
Oh,
timey
wow.
ones. And
Wow.
so you can get one of those at a thrift store for like $5. So I'm like, you know what? I'm in the game right now. I'm doing it right. And
Yeah.
so started roasting just for personal consumption and kind of hobbyist. Immediately got on the dorm floor, started roasting, and 50 of the college dudes that lived around me started walking into my room going, you know, whoa, what's that? Oh man, that smells good. What are you cooking in here, man? And so
Yeah.
uh obviously, they kind of fell in love with it. So me and my roommate, we built a little espresso bar in our dorm room. We took two mini fridges and the closet door off. We hung the closet door across the two mini fridges to make a bar.
Yeah.
And I bought some like home espresso gear, and so we were slinging drinks. And so I'd work my day job, go to school at night. I'd do homework while I was roasting coffee, and then the next morning I'd load up my bag with a bunch of fresh bags of roasted coffee, and I'd go wheel and deal out on campus. Because you don't need to carry books when you're in college. I don't know if you guys knew that, but
Yeah. Bags of coffee.
I'm just kidding. You do need the books, but I opted for the drug dealer route. So I
Yeah.
did that for 2 years, and then the dean caught wind of it and wasn't keen on me
No way.
running a for-profit business out of my dorm room that was also a pretty high fire hazard.
Yeah.
But at this point, I had like importer relationships. I was shipping 75 pounds of raw green coffee into my dorm room at a time, was drop shipping label stock and handwriting on my labels, and um, selling drinks out of my dorm room when I was there. People would come in, hey, you serving coffee right now? I'm like, yeah, I'm serving coffee, $5, $2, whatever.
That's amazing.
And so that was a lot of fun. And then when I moved out here in 2012, I was obviously a little bit, deep into the coffee world, and dreaming of, maybe running a place of my own one day. And
Mm-hmm.
so I immediately met Deb, my girlfriend, now wife. Allison was working for a wholesale account of Roast House. And she's
Okay.
like, oh my God, you're into coffee. You got to meet this crazy lady, Deb, who
Yeah.
founded this place. And you'll love her. And so I walked in, and I brought my own coffee, of course, my resume, my active resume. And
Yeah.
I handed it to Deb, and I asked her, for a job. And since we're not, trying not to edit things, she had some choice words for me. Something bug off was essentially the idea.
Oh, wow.
And shortly followed by "Where's Your Mother?" Because I was 19 at the time, and so it was pretty funny. We laugh about it now, and I was like, okay, immediately, I like you. I like the cut of your jib. We're gonna work well together. This is gonna be great. I'm a little sassy too,
Mm-hmm.
but she told me to go away because Roast House was only 2 years old,
Okay.
and so startup businesses you can't really afford bringing on extra labor and all that kind of stuff. They were running lean and mean. And
Yeah.
so I bugged off and I went and found another job. And then I just kept coming around Roast House and bugging them. Hey, can I ask you a
Mhm.
question about this? Hey, will you mentor me? Hey, will you teach me how to roast? Commercially, hey, I really want to learn these things. And, go away, go away, go away was kind of the repeat story.
Yeah.
Not in a mean way, just like, hey, man, we're trying to do this startup company. Like, we don't have the time to invest in someone we can't even afford to pay.
Right. Trying to
And
make it.
so a couple weeks in, yeah, exactly. And so a couple weeks in, Deb goes, okay, fine. You can hang out. You can do an apprenticeship with Dave, who was the head roaster at the time, started the company with Deb. But I can't afford to pay you. So if you do it, it's got to be on your time and you got to stay out of Dave's way if he's in a hurry. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I can respect that. So sure enough, I'd hang out on Saturday mornings and roast coffee with Dave, and he'd teach me how to cup and develop my palate and all this kind of stuff. And so um, about a month into that sort of, I put in air quotes, apprenticeship, um, he was like, you know what? I've been doing this coffee thing for a couple decades. I think I'm done with it. You want my job? And I was like, well, yeah, that was kind of the whole point.
Perfect.
Didn't really expect it to happen like this. So anyway,
Yeah.
so Deb comes up to me and we shook hands, and now fast forward, almost 12 years, we're
Wow.
still standing.
That's amazing. That is such a cool story. And like squeaky wheel gets the grease, never giving up. I think that is a definite trait of people who just are people who doing cool things. They just don't give up and they don't take no for answer. And it's like, I'm just going to help you for free and I'm going to be here. And it worked out. I'm just kind of curious. I know what the coffee scene kind of, because I go to certain coffee shops and I see them in town. I can kind of see what it looks like now. What was the coffee scene in Spokane 2012? Were there cool coffee
Mm.
shops? Were roasters in town? What did that look like?
Yeah, yeah, it was a pretty small window
Yeah.
of group. You had Indaba was open at the time.
Okay.
At that point, I think they were still a multi-roaster, so meaning they served multiple different roasters.
Hmm.
So they were bringing in stuff from all across the country,
Yeah.
serving those coffees. So you had them, and then you had Core Coffee. I don't know if you remember them. They
Mm-mm.
were on Monroe and Broadway.
Okay.
And they were also doing that kind of multi-roaster model, which was, hey, we're going to bring in, some of the country's best of the best. Um, and then Evans Brothers was around. They're out in Sandpoint,
Hmm.
Idaho, and then Doma Coffee was around. So those were kind of, and then of course you kind of had the big, maybe bigger. I don't know if I put them in the commodity category necessarily, but like larger scale roasters like, Thomas Hammer and Cravens and Four Seasons, and I'm sure I'm missing some of them. But
Okay.
as far as like small spots like us, there was really, probably less than half a dozen, I would say, right around there.
Hmm. Okay.
And you heard a lot of Spokane's not ready for that.
Really? Okay. Huh.
So I'd say, hey, we should be doing these single origin coffees where we're building relationships with producers and, telling their story and having them be the focal point rather than just, a blend name. Like, I mean, we have blend names too, but Shadow and
Mhm.
Cafe de Americas and F-Bomb and all those kind of coffees,
Yeah.
they sort of have a brand persona to them rather than, oh, this is from Oscar and Mildred's farm, this is from Diego's farm, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I really wanted to do that. That was kind of my vision for coffee and what we were doing here, especially from a sustainability standpoint, which is
Hmm.
really near and dear to Roast House and how we operate. And yeah, a lot of people just laughed at me. and said that we'd never be ready for that. And
Right.
so, you
Now
know,
it's everywhere.
that there was a good piece of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm glad you guys kept going. I'm glad there's more, spots for people to hang out in town. You talked about like sourcing
Yeah.
and, where you get your coffee from. How do you even go about sourcing your coffee? Because isn't coffee grown in like crazy remote places sometimes, and the technology is probably not the same. Communication is a barrier. Like, what do you guys do for that?
Yeah, so try and make this not a 3-hour TED talk.
Yeah, like I'm a golden retriever or something.
Yeah, a boilerplate. So, uh, brief outline of a supply chain. You would have a producer or a farmer,
Okay.
kind of interchangeable. We moved away from farmer a few years ago to producer, and there's some kind of language intentionality with that.
Okay.
Um, so there's usually a farm, let's say, it could be an acre, it could be 10 acres, it could be 100 acres. Um, pretty, most of them are pretty small across the
Yeah.
world. Coffee's an equatorial plant, so it's growing along the equator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you would have, so they're the ones that actually have the plants, right? The
Mm-hmm.
cherries. Coffee's the seed of a fruit. And
Right.
so that fruit needs to get hauled, processed, and then dried, and then that turns into what we call beans. I don't know why we called them beans instead of fruit seeds, but we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but actually, what we drink every day is the a green coffee bean. You can plant, and it'll germinate a new coffee plant. Not always, obviously, it's a seed,
Okay.
but um, so you got your farmer. Then you would have usually a mill or a processing facility. That's usually the place that has, the technology and the tools to pulp the coffee, which is
Mm.
usually some sort of milling machine that's, picture pitting a cherry.
Yeah.
You squeeze it and the pit pops out. Um, and then, your water channels and all that kind of stuff. And so from there, then it could go to export. But a lot of times it'll go to a cooperative because, let's say we're both producers and you have a 10-acre farm and I have a 10-acre farm. But if we put it together, now we have a 20-acre farm. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we blend our coffees, we form a co-op. Now we have kind of a two businesses serving the purpose of one, which means we're more likely to have better access to financial tools, agricultural tools, and for a lot of these rural communities, that's a big shift for them.
Okay.
So usually then it goes to a co-op. So producer, mill, co-op, and then the co-op is going to handle the money. So
Mm.
they're usually the ones that sell it to an exporter that gets it out of a country, let's say like Colombia. And then we have a US based company that imports it into the country. Those are both legal firms.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have kind of customs and all that stuff dialed in.
Right.
And
Right.
then from the importer would come to us as a roaster. And then obviously we'd roast it and you'd buy it and brew it at your house or your cafe. And
Wow.
so there's a lot of acting parties in there.
Yeah. A lot of
And
hands.
over the years, yeah, there's been a lot of exploitation. The middleman, the dark boogeyman is pretty common story, and there's a lot of horrible things that have happened kind of in that gray area between roaster and producer. And
Okay.
because the producer has the least access to technologies, information, transparency,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of the humanitarian space, we would talk about agency and access. Do you have access to tools? And if you have access to them, do you have the agency to actually utilize them?
Okay.
And if you don't have those two things, then we're not really talking equity at this point. We're talking about subservancy, some sort of hierarchy system rather than an independent business to an independent business. So imagine a scenario, for example, where I come into your coffee shop and I order a drip coffee and you tell me it's $3. And I go, cool, I have $1. What would you do?
Yeah. Say, sorry, Charlie.
It's $3. I don't, I, you take the mug back and
Yeah.
But imagine a scenario where you had to accept the dollar.
Right, right. Yeah,
It's a
that's
little bit laughable to us in our
yeah.
economy, but in a producing world, oftentimes that's the dynamic of a producer is they're going, hey, it cost me $2.20 to produce this pound of coffee.
Yeah.
And here is a buyer who wants to offer me $1.70.
Right. Yeah,
What
it's like
do I do?
why
It
even do it?
Right. And so then you have a mass exodus over time of coffee producers who are deforesting, cutting down their plants, planting something that's a better cash return.
Mm.
And so then you have a lot of sustainability issues over the long run. So what we've had to do over the years to build what we call maybe like a high trust supply chain
Mm-hmm.
is you build relationships with each step of that supply chain so that you can sustain a relationship year to year.
Okay.
Whereas the way that a lot of buyers function is they read the menu right to left. Whatever
Mm.
the cheapest coffee on the menu is, that's what I'm going to buy
Yeah.
because I'm trying to make my margins here in the US. And, it's not like our cost of goods are going down either. So, and that takes time. It's like building your relationship with your wife or, your relationship with your business partners. How does that happen? Time and effort and conversations and vetting and recognizing when someone's not a good fit and moving away
Hmm.
from them. A lot of intentionality in how you make decisions. So all of that can get really convoluted, which is
Yeah.
why there's so much in the market space for buzzwords and greenwashing, and people kind of doing the lip service and not actually performing it on the back end.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a long-winded rabbit hole that you can go down on each one of those relationships, but I think the big takeaway for us and how we source coffee is we look at organic for one, environmental stewardship. We look at equity, meaning can we pay enough for this producer to produce that coffee again next year
Yeah.
when we buy it again? And so those two things are tied hand in hand because if it's not environmentally sustainable, meaning they can't do it year to year, is directly tied to their financial sustainability as well. And
Yeah.
so if us as a buyer are making demands of a producer in a third world country, then we also have to be prepared to put our money where our mouth is when a producer comes to us and says, hey, I got to ask $1 more a pound because we had this leaf rust come through, or we had a drought, or we had heavy rains and our yield is down, and so we actually need more to produce the next year.
Hmm.
And the walk is uh, you paying the extra dollar rather than pulling out and I call it the Tinder economy, swiping to another producer in Colombia. I can go on 6 websites and find another producer, but I don't know what their environmental stewardship commitments are, and I don't know whether or not they're financially equitable either. And
Interesting.
so then we're starting from zero all over again. And so that's why sustaining those relationships every year is very, very important, because then it's sort of proof in the pudding over a period of time, um, rather than, sort of your one hit wonders of
Right.
sourcing.
Okay. I think that was helpful for me too. Also just to see how many hands the money touches. So when you go to buy a cup of coffee or a latte, you're not just paying one person, you're basically paying the
Yeah.
however many people it touched. And my wife can get mad at me because I'm
Yes.
a grouchy old man when it comes to certain things. And sometimes I'm like, why is this latte $7? And then I got a tip. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a lot,
Uh-huh.
a latte. But realizing, okay, I'm not doing this every day, and it's ultimately, you know, hitting multiple people. Um, I don't know. I'm just like, how has the costs affected you guys in the last, say, couple years? Have you seen like a noticeable increase, or what's that look like on your front?
Did something happen in the last couple of years?
Yeah, maybe.
Just kidding. um, yeah, freight went up. I mean, I think just on average, freight was somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 7 cents a pound, just to ship raw product into us. Now we're looking at 14 to 20.
Wow. So like it's a
And
fleet.
then, yep.
Wow.
And then, cost of production. So we buy organic coffee, which means that a lot of the producers that we work with don't use pesticides on their farms. However, a good chunk of the world is very, they're going to use pesticides on their farms. It's a commodity. They're going to do what they need to squeeze out the volume that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the largest producers in the world of fertilizer is Russia.
Oh, okay.
So we saw huge increases. So even though we work with organic producers, it affects them because the rest of that country's exports now just went up. And so too, rising tide raises all ships kind of deal.
Okay.
So yeah, green costs went up probably conservatively, maybe 20%. And then, labor obviously
Right.
has gone up over the years. You pay what you think is a legit wage, and then, minimum wage goes up. So now that legit wage is a smaller gap to the minimum,
Right.
which then prompts a whole bunch of psychological questions about, am I actually making enough? Okay, well, if minimum wage just went up $2, why didn't my wage go up $2? And sort of the sliding scale of that effect. So yeah, there was a lot of pieces that came into place, but what we did is we just communicated that to people. We offered options for, reducing people's costs, like buying in bulk. We
Mm-hmm.
do discounts on reusable containers, like, hey, bring in your Ziploc bag. I don't care what it is, and
Yeah.
we'll save you, because now we reduce our footprint on packaging waste. Packaging went up,
That's
probably
expensive.
10 to 12%. Yeah.
Packaging is
So,
very
so yeah,
expensive.
yeah, pretty dramatic, but you make adjustments, and then you just have honest conversations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the bags of chips you buy today were not the same bags of chips you bought last year.
Yeah.
If it was a 10-ounce bag last year, it's a 7-ounce bag this year. Next year, maybe it'll be 5. Who knows? Um,
Right.
or maybe we'll just have a random influx of chip money, and we'll go back to 12-ounce bags. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, reading your blog posts and stuff, I think you write most of them. I saw your name on them, but you can just tell like you're very transparent. You don't leave anything, unknown, and you just say, "Hey, here's the deal, and this is how you can get those costs down," like you just explained. And I know that you use organic coffee, and I learned about the term single origin from my wife, who loves chocolate.
Love it.
And so we are those people who
Yes,
like $12 chocolate bars, and now I actually like them.
absolutely. My
First I was,
people.
first I was embarrassed, and now I love them. And so we like, bite our little piece of chocolate and get the notes. And so like what's up with single origin, and why does it make a difference, or, what's cool about single origin?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the impact is that, kind of twofold. One, if I can sell a lot of a single origin, that's from a single producer or
Mm,
a co-op of producers, which means I get to have a larger impact in my purchasing volume. If I'm using 2 coffees in a blend, let's say, and I'm doing 50-50, I cut my support amount in half
yeah.
of what I would otherwise be able to buy from that producer. And so, we did a little study years ago with our F-bomb, and we put, same batch, same cup, the whole nine. We put them side by side. One was the name of the producer, which was at the time was Mexico Mahamut. And
Mm,
then the other cup said F-bomb, which was the blend name that we had, opted to call it, because Deb had come in when I was roasting a batch. It smelled like I was baking brownies, and she, lit up with some fun words, some fantastic words, F words. And so we were like, oh, haha, we should call it F-bomb. Wouldn't that be funny? Hee hee, we're so silly. Uh, And so anyway, so we put these two coffees out in front of people and we asked which one's your favorite. And mind you, same coffee, same roast profile, same batch, same brew preparation, everything's the same. The only thing that's different is the label. And everyone opted for that one.
Really? Huh.
Yes. And
Is that what you
so
would have
you have an
expected?
inherent, no, you would think, well, someone's got to at least guess that they both taste somewhat similar.
Yeah.
But no, they did not. They thought they
Hmm.
were vastly different. And
Wow.
so it just kind of pointed at the fact that, we tend to gravitate as consumers to a brand identity more so than an origin name.
Mhm.
And so we kind of wrestled with the idea of like, well, if F Bomb allows us to sell more of that coffee, then next year we get to support that producer group more
Hmm.
than we did the year prior.
Yeah.
So does it really matter that it's a blend name instead of the SO name? There's kind of arguments there on both sides. I get both perspectives, but for us, if the goal was buy more coffee so that we can support these producers who are, doing the things that we value, then why wouldn't I do my best as a partner to sell more of their coffee?
Right.
And if that meant, moving it into a name, a branded name, rather than the name of the farm itself.
Yeah.
So actually, a lot of our coffees are single origins by nature because that's what we believe in.
Right.
Um, but they might carry a blend name, you know.
Okay. It connects with the
And then there are
consumer.
other times where our blend, yes, yeah,
Hmm.
and that allows us to, like I said, buy more coffee from those producers, which makes us a bigger impact. So now they don't need to go shopping for a bunch of buyers because they know Roast House is going to come back to them every year and they're going to grow their contracted volume every year.
Right.
Um, but for us, I mean, the taste side of single origins, a lot of times, we can roast lighter, we can showcase, coffee's a plant, it's a variety, which means just like your wines and your beers and your spirits, you can have a wide variety of flavor profiles.
Hmm.
Within the same coffee plant, there are a million offshoots of different varieties. So, like, I have you propped up on a variety called Tabby. And last year we had a totally different processing method. This year we have a natural process method. And so, two totally different cups, same producer. Behind me is three of the same plant variety, but three different processing methods. So those are all going to have different taste profiles and cut profiles, even though it's the same farm, the same plant, they process them differently. And so you
Wow.
get a lot more variety and complexity in single origins than you do a blend that is sort of aimed, a lot of times a blend is a dedicated flavor profile that a roaster's trying to replicate year after year so that someone who's shopping in a grocery store, whatever, might go, hey, I like my Cafe de Americas because it's always chocolatey and caramel, and that's what I like in the morning. And
Yeah.
so they just always go to that.
Okay.
A single origin is a little more, can be sometimes a little more of a gamble of like wide variety of cup profiles.
Okay. Okay. So here I gotta ask, I need you to rate my morning coffee routine. So
Okay.
one being pretty basic, 10 being like
Mm-hmm.
I wore my jean jacket just for extra points, like coffee
Oh,
efficient.
okay. All right. Got it.
So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah. I got it. I know.
nothing
I dressed up too with my hoodie. Yeah.
nothing fancy here, but this is we have two kids under like 4.5 and 1.5. And so this is built for
Okay.
speed. And
Yes.
I'm not a, I kind of like a little sweetness in my coffee. So we have an espresso,
Okay.
and I'm not a big caffeine guy. I do a decaf coffee, an espresso pod. While that's going, people are going to hate on this too. I use soy milk because I'm not a big
Okay.
milk dairy guy. So I do soy milk in a frother with a little maple syrup for a little sweetness. So I get a sweet, frothy, foamy, milk to pour over the top. And then if I really want to get fancy, I do a little cinnamon. But pretty much it's just like your basic maple latte. But I
Hmm.
don't know what your thoughts are on espresso or anything like that.
Uh, well, if we were comparing morning coffee routines, you put more work into your morning cup than I do.
Two buttons, two buttons.
I'm a drip pot guy. I just let's
Okay.
go.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
brew me a pot and I'll drink it.
Okay. So I have to fluff it up a
Uh,
little
so
bit.
so you're actually ahead of me. I think. I think you're far more like a barista in your morning, and I'm like a groggy. Like we have a 1 year old, so I'm not where you're at. We're still two parents to one child, but you
Yeah.
guys are running man to man coverage over there.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I'm a big drip guy. That's my go-to. Nespresso, I think, it served its purpose.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, we're very conscious of packaging waste and things like that. So,
Yeah.
there's some things with espresso that's can be concerning long term. But I think I'm pretty sure they're probably working on some recyclable or compostable options there too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
I've actually never had an espresso.
Okay. It's pretty, I mean, it's pretty good, in my opinion, but obviously, there's people who like Keurig and there's people who like full. So
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I used to work at a wine shop and the guy who owned it, he's fantastic, but he was like, the best wine is like the wine that you like the best. And so he
Yes.
wasn't, judgy or anything like that, but I
Yeah.
was just kind
We tell people that all the time. They come in the tasting room and they're like, so what's the best way to brew coffee? And I'm like, oh, look, how are you brewing it now? And they'll walk me through their process. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. Do you like it? They're like, I love it. It tastes so good. I'm like, you're brewing the best cup of coffee
of, yeah,
you can. They're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But like, how can I make it better? I'm like,
yeah,
how can it be better if it's perfect the way that you're making it now?
right, right.
And so, yeah, specialty industries have kind of been notorious for, uh, man, I'm really proud of myself for not cussing. I just have to say, I'm just gonna, pat myself on the
Amazing.
back.
I'm curious how.
Not kind,
Yeah,
not kind human beings, because we know so much about the product, right? We're just like
yeah,
up to our eyeballs in coffee beans all day, every day, and so we're like, oh my God, what do you mean you don't weigh out the grams of your coffee, and what you don't use this dispersion method tool, and what's your puck prep look like, and all these kind of nerdy terms.
yeah.
One of my original mentors in coffee, Felton Ross, he runs Felton's Coffee out in
Well,
Everett, and he was so kind, so generous to me. He would field my calls and just let me pick his brain, and amazing human being. But I asked him one time, I'm like, so how do you do quality control? Like, what do you do for your QC when you're trying to like make sure your product's consistent and all that? He goes, oh, I went to the thrift store and I bought a Mr. Coffee machine. And I'm like, what do you mean a Mr. Coffee machine? Like, dude, like all these roasters have like reverse osmosis water
yeah,
systems that they're reintroducing minerals to optimize the whatever stuff in water that makes coffee taste good that doesn't really matter to the 99% of the population.
yeah,
Uh, and $3,000 grinders, and this calibrated water temperature that's dialed into the atmospheric pressure of their brain, cranium, whatever. uh I
yeah.
don't know, people get crazy, man.
Oh,
And he goes, yeah, I don't, no one's drinking my coffee that way. He
yeah,
goes, my wholesale accounts who are running a professional coffee shop, they're going to drink my coffee that way. But 9 times out of 10, all the people that are picking up a bag of coffee retail are brewing it at home, probably without filtered water,
yeah.
probably without a grinder, and probably in a $10 brewer, $15 brewer. I mean,
Mm,
at the time, now they're like probably like $75 or whatever. But
okay.
and I just always appreciated that approach,
Yeah,
and taking your superiority complex as a specialist down a notch to realize that coffee can be as complicated as you want to make it, or it can be as simple as it's good, it's bad.
right.
And the choice is up to you. And me as a professional, it is not my job to tell you how to consume a product. It is my job to educate when you ask for it
Hmm.
and ask questions when you're having problems and to produce the best coffee that I possibly can because you're spending your hard-earned dollars on a product that I'm making. So the best thing I can do is I can do that energy for you. And that's what you're paying your $7 for a latte for, hopefully, is
Right.
a barista who cares enough to, master a craft, just like a bartender would or anyone else. So, yeah, I don't really get judgy with coffee prep. The
Yeah.
only time I get judgy is when someone's charging someone else money for it. And then I'm
Mm.
like, all right, now we're going to raise our game a little bit
Right.
because we're now selling something.
Hmm.
So there's a professional obligation, in my opinion, to serve something of quality.
Yeah.
If I'm making it at home, I mean, honestly, the 3 months when we first had Teddy, I lived on our instant coffee because we have a line of instant coffee, and
Right.
I just rip dump water,
Yeah.
slams back. It was utility. I didn't care what it tasted like, and our instant's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. I remember the first kiddo, first 3 months. Yeah. I just lived on Lara bars. I just like, what can I eat
Oh
that's
my God, yeah. Allie was asking me the other day. She was like, "Do you remember those? You made these turkey sandwiches when Teddy was like fresh out the womb. Like, do you remember these? Like, how did you make these turkey sandwiches?" I was like, "I have Teddy's screaming at me right now. Uh, I'm like, I have no memory of making these sandwiches. She's like, no, we were like sitting here in the kitchen, and he was in his little rocker, and we were eating these turkey sandwiches, and you made them like all week. I'm like, I have zero memory of making turkey sandwiches,
just surviving.
but apparently they were real good. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so I've seen this. I don't really know about it. I don't know if it's like wine tasting or what, but like what in the heck is cupping? Like what is that? Because to me, I'm
Mm,
like, I
yeah.
don't know. I don't know what that is. And if you guys are drinking coffee for like hours, like I would be in the bathroom holding up the whole show. And so like what's going on
Yeah.
there? And why do you do it?
Would you like me to grab a prop?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Grab a prop.
Should I? Okay. All right. I'll
Yeah.
be right back. Okay. I'm back. So, prop time.
Okay.
So origins, roughly guesstimated that it arrived, was developed in Brazil, but you might fact check me on that one.
Okay.
So as we were just discussing, we all have different preps of our coffee in the morning. And so if part of attributing a dollar value to a commodity product outside of what the commodity is actually being exchanged at the time, because coffee is a publicly traded commodity. So we're
Mm.
talking outside of that, what a specialty premium would be.
Okay.
We have to have some sort of common language between producer and buyer. And so, and this has bucket loads of errors in it still to this day, and probably almost always will. If you research into wine, there's some pretty incredible things that have been developed over the years. But for coffee, you got to remember specialty coffee wasn't uttered until I think 1978.
Oh,
So, all
just-
things considered, it's a very young industry.
mhm.
Coffee isn't, but specialty coffee would be. So, what happens when you have two producers right next door to each other and they're both trying to sell, you know, regionally maybe the same coffee, but one actually tastes better than the other? Where is the economic reward? And so there were a lot of issues with preparation and how we taste coffees because taste is subjective. So
Mhm.
how do we objectify, make the process of uh, attributing quality to a coffee as objective as possible? And
Mm.
so cupping was developed to do that for one. And for two, when you go into larger environments, sometimes there will be, you know, 15 to upwards of 100 lots on the table to choose from.
Wow.
And so, how do you brew all of those coffees and judge all those coffees and make a decision on all those coffees at that volume when you're sipping a mug of coffee? It's just not a practical
Okay.
exercise to do. So, kind of utility for speed, and then also to standardize the way that we're both judging and evaluating the coffee. And so, this is in a specialty coffee shop, this is a $7 or $10 cupping bowl.
Okay.
At a restaurant supply store, this is a $1.50 chowder bowl.
Nice.
Uh, Essentially, the idea is that you're going to take roughly about a 7-ounce vessel. So it could be this bowl, it could be a glass, it could be a mug, whatever, but 7 ounces specifically. And
Hmm.
we're going to put about 11 to 12 grams of coffee in that bowl. And we're going to grind it all the same. And per sample, so if I'm tasting 10 lots, so 10 different productions, I'm going
Hmm.
to have at least 3, if not 5 cups from each lot. So that means that for a table of 10 lots, I'm going to have 30 to 50 cups on the table.
Wow.
And the reason that we do that is one defect in 10 grams or 12 grams of coffee, depending, people kind of tweak how much they like to use, what their perception is. We use about 11.
Hmm.
Um, is I will be able to taste the defect in one of these cups.
Huh.
Now, coffee's an agricultural product, so it's going to be allotted even at your top grades, some semblance of, you might go buy some organic produce and there's going to be a bruised apple in there, or there's going to be a, wilted something, or a bug bit off a leaf of kale or whatever. That's
Right.
okay. It doesn't so that's why we do 3 to 5,
Okay.
because if 4 out of the 5 cups are defect free, but the one has a defect, that kind of gives me a rough running average of what a 150-pound bag, like the bags behind me, are going to
Mm.
have in them.
Okay.
Now, if 4 out of the 5 cups have that defect in it, now I can kind of assume that if I buy 150 pounds of it, a good 80% of them is going to be defect riddled. And so I'm going to have a subpar product.
Wow.
So 11 grams goes in here, you grind it, and then you would fill it up with hot water. That forms, they call a crust on the top
Mm.
of the coffee. We would have evaluated it dry, so with no water, the smell, because
Mm.
there are defects that can be present in scent. Then we would evaluate it wet with water. And then at the end, we would take our fancy little silver plated
Yeah.
spoon,
Very cool.
and we would break the crust and smell. And so that crust traps a lot of volatile aromatics. So then we would smell it, and then we would clear those grounds off. So now we're about minute 4 into our cupping process. And so now we're doing this at the same time as the rest of the 30 to 50 cups.
Wow.
Um, and then we're going to wait for them to cool down, obviously, because we're not trying to burn the piss out of our mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one. Sorry. Uh, we're not trying to burn our mouth. And then once it's cool enough, we're going to dip a spoon in, slurp it, right? Just like wine tasting, whiskey tasting, slurping, aerates. You taste a lot with your olfactory, which is your scent. And so tasting actually with your mouth open or introducing air into your taste buds can be very helpful. And then we're going to taste all 5 cups and move on. And in most settings where you're tasting 30 to 50 cups, you're going to be spitting.
Okay.
So some people have spittoons. Sometimes you're holding a cup that you're spitting into.
Mm.
And that's just so that you're not drinking 50 cups of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though they're a spoonful, it does add up. I
Yeah.
remember the first cupping I did, I was like, nah, I can drink that. I can handle this. And I think we had, it was in Seattle with an importer. And I think we had about 80, we had 8 tables, and there was 5 lots per table. So yeah, it was well over 100 cups.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was it was a little wild. So yeah, I recommend when you're doing it that volume, just spit. There's no ego. Just don't spit on someone's shoe. That's the
Yeah,
only like faux pas.
that's the rule.
And then there's a scoring rubric. So
Mm,
then we would rate on aroma, we would rate on fragrance, which that's dry and wet.
mm,
We would rate on flavor. So like, is it complex? Is it simple? Is it, is there very clear pronounced notes, or is it just kind of generic? Like, is it a, oh, it tastes like chocolate, or is it like a single origin chocolate that has that little fruity thing to it?
hmm.
Um, and then we would do acidity, which is like perceived brightness. So a sliding scale is like an apple would be 1.
Mm,
So still pretty bright and punchy, still vibrant, but not as vibrant as a lemon on the other side of things. So they
okay.
both have an acidity to them, a brightness to them in the palate, but
Okay.
one's more intense. One's like dialed up to 11. And then obviously finish and kind of body or texture. And then there will be a score. And
Okay.
so then that's in a formal setting how we would evaluate coffee. For us, that's how we decide what we want to buy.
Mm,
And then we do QC as brewed coffee.
okay. That makes sense. I didn't even think of
Yeah.
it on the quality control side. I just thought almost like which one do we like more? But I can see how, if something has multiple defects or majority of those cups have defects, you would you would kind of be buying a product that's not gonna look good when you're making it and selling it to the consumer. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so at the roast house, you do cool things like with coffee, but I've also noticed you do some other things like a hibiscus soda, or you're working with some different breweries on products like that. Can you tell me more about that? Like, what do you guys have going on that's kind of a little bit different than your typical coffee?
Yeah. So we've done a bunch of collabs over the years. One of them is with our good friend Adam Boyd, who's the head brewer at Garland Brew Works.
Mm,
I first met him when he was at Iron Goat
okay.
back in the day, and we did a couple beers together and kind of tinkered and jived with each other. And we had actually planned to do. He's given some talks and is a very esteemed brewer in the home brewing world as well.
Oh, cool.
And so he always gets invited to speak at the Home Brewers Association. They throw a big thing. And so we had decided to, one of our passions among many things is, coffee's an ingredient. It's a culinary ingredient. So,
Yeah.
people have certain perceptions around, okay, if you're going to make an ice cream with coffee, you're going to do a chocolate ice cream. If you're going to do a coffee beer, you're going to do a dark stout with a dark roasted coffee.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do, you know, any kind of coffee flavored type beverage, there are just some assumptions that get made.
Yeah.
And what Adam and I always tried to do was buck that a bit,
Cool.
change the perspective. And so we did this big beer one year, a big stout, but instead of going dark roasted with dark roasted malts for the beer, we went really light, fruity Ethiopian coffee
Mm.
in the beer. And so now you had the dark stout flavor, but then you had this like tinge of blueberry in there as well from the coffee.
Nice.
And it was just a way to mix things up. So we have a beer. It's coming out tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
Funny
sweet.
enough that you asked.
Nice.
And we're calling it the Clean Sneak
Clean.
because we used he used a lager yeast,
Mm.
which kind of mellows out the body of the beer a little bit. He lowered the roast element of the beer so that the roasts aren't competing with each other. It's like
Okay.
having two strong flavor profiles. It's like, pouring yourself a rye whiskey and then pouring some more scotch in it. You're just like, why did you? It's just two intense whiskeys that you smashed together and
Yeah.
called it good for whatever reason. And so we really kind of tried to play on a lighter bodied stout that's like almost refreshing to drink, which is also kind of a weird
Yeah.
concept.
Very cool.
Stouts are typically heavier profiled. and then
Mm,
introducing the roast characteristic with the coffee itself,
mm,
um, which is also not really heard of. Usually you introduce the roast with the malts in the beer. So
yeah.
we did that. We do coffee ice cream with the scoop. She does
Nice.
a ice cream with us every year. We've worked with her, Jen, since she opened. She's amazing. We have coffee. So I was saying earlier, coffee grows inside of a cherry.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of times this cherry is a waste product,
Right.
but there's a producer out of Brazil that dries it and sells it as dried coffee cherry. And it
Mm,
doesn't taste anything like coffee. It tastes like melon. It's a little lemony. It's fresh. It's got a little hibiscus flavor to it.
yeah.
And so we take that. That product's called Cascara,
Mm,
and we take that and do all sorts of fun drinks with it, like spiced chais and all sorts of fun stuff. So we have a really good time here at the tasting room. Mixing up our drink preparation. Our main focus, obviously, is the coffee and doing coffee tastings, black, but
yeah.
we also have a rotation of seasonal drinks that are usually pretty interesting and different than your run of the mill cafe.
Right.
And that's a lot of fun to work on. So right now we're working on our winter menu, which is going to be great.
Nice. Nice. That's amazing. And yeah, just from looking at, your website, your Instagram, just how your team functions, seems like you guys just have fun. And I love it. And I don't know, like, how do you get such a fun team? Because not everyone loves where they work. Not everyone, loves what they do. And it just seems like you guys gel. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing it and I'm just seeing the highlights, but you guys just look fun and like I can tell by your branding. It's just cool.
Uh, this is probably a topic I'm more passionate about than coffee.
Yeah. Tell me more.
Uh, yes. Uh, Culture in a workspace is riddled with a lot of problems, especially in food and beverage. Notoriously low wages, pretty toxic work environments. Unfortunately, a lot of addiction.
Mm,
Drama is very prevalent in the food and beverage space. Um, you know, uh, Bosses expecting things that they aren't clearly communicating on, nor are they willing to pay for. There's a lot of hiccups in there, as there are in other industries. I'm not saying
right.
food and beverage is a unique snowflake in that department, but in a lot of ways there are huge cultural gaps. And so for me, I looked at Deb started Roast House with a passion on sustainability from an environmental standpoint. And I got into coffee because I was really passionate about the product was fun, but to me the social impact was a far bigger driving force for me. Still
Hmm.
is, and there's a lot to it. But number one is our goal has always been to communicate over our media platforms exactly what you expect when you walk through our door.
Hmm.
And so, no, it's not fluff. You walk in here and we'll give each other a bad time, Oh yeah, he made us smile for that photo, or whatever. But
Yeah.
um, our my aim has always been around, very clear communication, very clear expectations, um, and then knowing your homework, knowing where your math is and what you can afford and what you can pay people, and being transparent around that, and being transparent with goals and vision casting, so that when everyone wants to move up, and so
Yeah.
we've sort of taken on the challenge of being a choose your own adventure workplace. And we talk about that literally from day one, even in interviews, where it's like, hey, what are you interested in? Like, yes, there's some nuts and bolts of things like mopping floors and wiping down bar tops and
Yep.
serving guests you don't want to serve, and like those
Hmm.
are gonna. Everyone has to do that in every industry. They have to do stuff they don't want to do. But those are also the nuts and bolts that allow us to be a business that exists.
Hmm.
So beyond that, how do we mold and shape positions around people's interests? And of course, you're always going to hit a wall where there's nothing else that you can do for someone
Right.
and what they're looking for. But a lot of times there's a lot that you can do. And there's a lot of great conversations that you can have and encouraging of personal growth. And without it being, an oversharing dynamic either,
Yeah.
transparency is a double-edged sword that way. I
Yeah.
heard a quote that said, transparency without discernment is foolishness.
Yeah.
So I think there's some wisdom there.
Hmm.
But in the long run, yeah, our culture has always been built around, working our buns off so that we can play and have a good time and continue to do the things that we love.
Right.
And when people are tired in a position or want to move in a different direction, there's conversations around that. What are you looking for? What exactly do you want? Well, I don't actually know. Okay, cool. Well, why don't we discover that together? And then as you
Hmm.
walk through that process with people, they get to learn things while you get to learn things about how to be a better leader and how to be a better kind of entrepreneur. I think it impacts your business because now you're not just in your head, how do I get my business to survive? It's how do I get my business to survive and also put quality time and seasons with the people that are helping me build it at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, and then as an employer, you don't own anyone. We got rid of that. I
Yeah.
think that's a thing that people forget. You don't own someone when you employ them.
Right.
And a lot of small business owners, they might agree with you, but they also kind of think that maybe they do own them a little bit.
Yeah.
And when expectations are breached and things don't get delivered, people get upset. And it's like, hey, listen, like they had the right to walk out at any time. You didn't have an employment contract here. And
Hmm.
so that alleviates a lot of pressure off of me and stress and anxiety and like vestedness to just be able to enjoy a season with someone and enjoy being, shoulder to shoulder. Um, and I think there's a lot of power in how you build your business if that takes root in a healthy way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's clear you guys have a vision. You have a brand voice. Like I feel like I know you guys, just from looking, at your socials and stuff like that. Yeah, so you've done a great job. Do you think so? When I think about some coffee shops, I bet some people just run through baristas and they run through employees and people do it, for a few months and they're bouncing around. Do you think that mission helps you have more longevity with, the people that are part of your team and that are working with you?
Yes, and the mission can't be BS.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the most
Makes sense.
important part.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Companies go, well, I do have a mission statement and I printed it on the locker room door and it's in the bathroom and every employee has to sign a contract that says they believe in the same mission. It's like, yeah, but is it BS? Is it nonsense?
Hmm.
Like, do you go read that mission statement when you're orienting a new employee and then go do the exact opposite thing 5 minutes later? Because if that happens, your mission statement now means jack squat.
Yep.
And so I think, yes, it is very important to have, hey, this is who we are and this is where we're going, clarity.
Hmm.
But it also has to be lived out in a tangible way. It can't just be a buzzword that someone throws out and they're like, we really stand for, this, that, and the other thing. And you're like, cool, show me one thing that happened this week that you made a conscious effort in that value.
Hmm.
And a lot of times it's not always the case, which is why you see huge attrition rates.
Yeah.
You onboard someone, the whole interview process is my farts never stink, your farts never stink. We're going to work together and we're just going to be these beautiful human beings that never make stinky noise out of our butts. But the reality is that if either one of us have too much dairy, we're probably going to have some stinky toots. And that's okay, but we need to address that on day one.
Right.
I know it's silly. I
Yeah.
always try, and I
It's
say this
clear.
in my interviews.
Yeah.
People are sick of hearing this fart joke from me, but I believe in it so much because the whole interview is me trying to convince you I never suck. And
Right.
you, as the employer, you're trying to convince me that you never suck.
Yeah.
But we all suck sometimes, and that's okay. But we need to have that type of dialogue often and honestly, and with as the least amount of shame that we possibly can muster.
Right. Right. Is there
So,
anyone?
and I think if you can do that, your attrition rate goes down dramatically.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anyone or any type of person that you think that you draw in or that basically comes to you looking for work? Do you think that you bring a different, type of person than maybe other typical coffee shops? Maybe people who are more motivated to actually be part of a team and not just sling lattes or, you know, I
Yes,
don't know if that makes sense.
I do, and I don't want to be prideful in this, but it's something that we've worked very diligently at in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
Um, I think that average attrition rate in the industry is somewhere 3 to 6 months,
Hmm.
on a good case, 6 months to a year. In the places that are sort of exhibiting, we're not the only ones out there that kind of believe this deeply about culture and communicating. And,
Right.
those attrition rates are closer to like 3 years,
Mm.
3 to 4 years.
That's amazing.
And so that's a big gap.
Yeah, outstanding.
That's a big
So
gap.
I
So
know I know I'm taking up a bunch of your time, but I just have a couple more questions. And like, we've talked about the roast house and where it began. Where's it going? What's next for the roast house? Where do you see it going? What are you excited about?
yeah. I like it. Well, we're in fourth quarter of the year, so now we're vision casting 2024. So you're right in my noggin space for the quarter. But yeah, we launched an instant coffee lineup about a
Cool.
year ago, almost exactly, and it's done amazing for us. And it's been a ton of fun because we were able to kind of provide a single serve product like your Nespresso, but it's organic coffee, it's a premium product, it's specialty, and it's done really, really great. So it grew from being like 2 to 3 SKUs to now 5 to 6. And so we have some future plans for that in 2024, expanding the line, offering some different solutions with it. Um, we do a lot of like higher end offerings. So we have kind of like, I would say, like maybe 3 tiers. So your
Okay.
base core coffees, everyday coffees, your single origins that are a little more expensive but still approachable, and then we do some like stupid coffees, like the coffees that break world records and are going for like $20 a cup.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and we've done that for the last, mm, I think it's been 6 years.
Okay.
So maybe longer. But we're gonna do Deterra, which is these boxes over here, is a producer in Brazil, and they do this big auction every year of 15 of the craziest lots that they produce. They put it on this global auction.
Wow.
These coffees fetch sometimes $150 a pound.
Hmm.
Just insane, and they fly all Europe, Hong Kong. Everyone's bidding. The last time we landed a lot was in 2018.
Wow.
So we're going to do it again this year, and we're actually the only roaster in the Northwest that I'm aware of who has the sample set. So we're going to host a big tasting. We're
Oh,
going to invite our whole community in to taste all 15 coffees.
cool.
And then of those 15 coffees, we're going to pick which one we want to bid on. And then December 5th, we bid on it
Wow.
and go through this. It starts at 6 a.m. I'll be tied to a computer for the whole day. It's kind of like, I just imagine that's what day trading is like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
me making little bids all day.
Yeah.
Makes me feel really cool. I'll probably put a pencil behind my ear or something just to feel
Yep.
real special.
Yep. I love
But yeah, so we're
it.
gonna bring one on. I'm really excited. Those coffees are mind blowing. The last one we bought was like drinking a pineapple upside down cake. It was like caramely pineapple
Whoa.
cherry, just so amazing. So
Wow.
I'm really pumped for that. So that'll probably come. We'll probably release that sometime in April. We'll have a big anniversary party January 4th. We're super active in the cycling community, so I've got a ton of fun cycling events that I'm planning for next year that we'll host some bike rides, and then
Nice.
everyone ends back here and we do a cookout. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's uh, planned for next year, and years to come, that'll just allow us to keep doing what we love doing, which is sourcing organic coffee, buying from the same producers, and having a kick butt team around here to run and gun with. So
It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm glad we got to chat. I learned so much today. It's fantastic, and you guys are just the coolest. Couple questions before you go. I got three questions. Two of them are just I think they're fun. But where's your favorite place to eat in Spokane? We both live in Spokane. Where do you like to go eat in this city? Do you have a favorite spot? It can be fancy, not fancy, just
yeah,
you choose. It's hard to choose.
have you heard of they have like the Golden Arches? Have you heard of this place?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Can I say two? Do I have to
Yeah.
pick one?
Yeah. Say two.
Okay. Wooden City and Zona Blanca, hands down.
Wow.
When we were starting out First Avenue, the Wooden City crew was in the shop all the time planning the restaurant. I love dining there. It's always amazing. Hospitality is incredible.
They're
Food's
amazing.
always knockout. And
Yep.
then uh, Chad and I and Deb have been friends for a long time, and so we're big suckers for Zona Blanca as well, because tequilas and
Yep.
tacos. There's nothing better in life.
Two of my favorites as well. I would 100% agree. And then this is an
Yeah.
interesting question, but who's someone that maybe more people in
Mm.
Spokane should know?
Like an individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's an interesting person? Who's
Uh, this is gonna sound silly, because she's, we're partners together, but I think people need to know Deb more.
Deb Moore?
I think people know of her. They
Hmm.
know her, that she's kind of spunky out there. Loves organic coffee. Tells it how it is. But
Yeah.
who she is in her heart and her spirit, I think very few people have spent the time to get to know her in that way. And the people that do know that she is quite the incredible human being.
Ah, that's awesome. All right. So how can people find the roast house? How can they come, buy your coffee? I know you sell online. Uh, so where would you send people if they want to get in touch and drink some damn good coffee?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, roasthousecoffee.com. Obviously,
Mhm.
we drop ship. We've got subscription services, free shipping, the whole nine. So if you're at distance, that's always a great resource. We're super active on our social media platforms. So if you got questions about coffee, you want to get into roasting, you want to buy green coffee, you want to nerd out on how to brew better or different, obviously you can send us a message at the Roast House on Instagram or Facebook. I think the Facebook URL is like Roast House Spokane.
Okay.
But I run both platforms, so you can bug us all you want. And then our tasting room here in Spokane. So we're off Foothills and Division, so just about a couple miles north of Gonzaga.
Hmm.
And we offer free tastings all day, every day. So you can come in. We have a board with 20 of our current coffees on the menu. And
Cool.
you can just go, oh, I want to try that one and that one and that one. And we'll brew them up fresh for you. Take the time to give you way more information about coffee than you'll ever want or need
Hmm.
again in your life. But it'll be fun. We'll have a good time.
Nice. Nice. Okay, my wife,
So
we're
yeah, I
gonna
would
do
say
this.
come
I'm coming in.
do it. I
Yeah.
love it.
I'm gonna bring my wife. She is like a super taster. She doesn't believe me, but like
Mm,
she gets down and dirty with the notes and the flavors, and she runs a food blog, and we love all the food and stuff, and so I think she would have a ball at that.
we're the
So
spot.
uh, yeah.
You got to bring her.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I will, but dude, thank you for hopping on. I really appreciate it. I love that I got to, learn more, and I'm really excited to share your story with people in the community.
Thank you so much for having me.